Northgate wore winter like a bruise. The sky pressed low and grey, the kind of lid that kept the light from getting in and the heat from getting out. Lieutenant Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the small hillside cemetery, where the wind never learned to whisper. It scraped, it bit. It carried the smell of iron and pine and something colder that did not belong to weather at all. He had come in uniform, though no one asked him to. Habit, maybe. Penalty, more likely. The black band on his badge had started as a gesture and hardened into routine. He crouched in the drift that had swallowed the base of the memorial stone and brushed the fresh crust away with a gloved palm. The name cut him every time. K9 Shadow, faithful partner, end of watch. There was no grave beneath the plaque, just a folded flag kept in a drawer at the station and an empty leather leash on a hook by Ethan's door that he still reached for in the dark. He did not pray. He did not talk long to the cold. He said the same thing he said most mornings because it hurt cleanly and did not linger. "Where are you, boy?" A gust ran the length of the fence and made the wires sing. Something thin and pale tugged out from the base of the stone. Not flowers, not ribbon. Paper. He pinched the corner and worked it free. Notebook lines bled where the snow had chewed them, but the drawing was intact. A German shepherd behind bars, chest deep and proud despite the cage. One ear carried a small notch near the tip. The collar plate was a crooked oval, and in a child's hand the name sat there, stubborn and sure. Shadow. Above the head, in red crayon, 2 blunt words. Still alive. Ethan felt it like he had stepped into a room he thought was empty and heard breathing. The details were too right, the notch on the ear from the tracker mount that went sideways during a field exercise 2 summers back. The oval plate he had hammered out with a station punch when the original tag cracked. You could not guess those. Either you had seen the dog up close, or you were the kind of liar who always gets caught by the small things. He scanned the hill. No footprints near him except his own and the narrow V of a fox that had cut for the tree line before dawn. The snow had started again. It erased and forgave in equal measure. The paper was wet at the edges and soft as cloth. He turned it over. A faint blue grid peeked through the pulp. Not just notebook stock, the back was pre-printed with boxes and tiny labels. Property receipt, Northgate Police Department, case number handwritten in his own blocky script from months ago. The warehouse fire, the night shadow vanished. The paper had been torn from the duplicate copy of the property log he filed that night. He remembered the sheet, the way the pen dug because his hand shook. He had kept his copy in the locked cabinet behind his desk. The twist came hot and fast. This did not drift in on the wind. Whoever left it had been close enough to his life to touch what he locked. Away. He stood so fast his knees stung. The cemetery was empty of people, but not of the feeling of being watched. The low shape of the water tower sat like a shoulder against the clouds. Down the slope, a county plow moaned along Main Street, orange lights turning the falling flakes into slow sparks. It passed and left the town more alone than before. Ethan slid the drawing inside his coat and started for his truck. The memory worked him while he walked. Not pictures, sensation. The wet heat of Shadow's breath against his wrist while they waited for the entry signal. The single chuff the dog gave when he understood a change in plan. The burst of glass as the back door went. The shout. The flare of a bottle thrown wrong in an old building taking the light like tinder. Shadow had pushed past him when a voice screamed from the stairs. Smoke cut the world in half. Men dragged Ethan out by the harness of his plate carrier, and when he clawed back toward the door, the ceiling came down in a white roar and a red one. After, there were reports and insurance, statements and blame. A collar never found. A dog they told him was Ash. He reached his pickup and found he was not alone. A late-model sedan idled one space over, windows fogged from within. He would have missed it if not for the small black dot glinting behind its windshield wiper. A lens. Someone had mounted a consumer camera there with a strip of tape. He walked past, slow, angled his body so his shoulder blocked his face from the glass, and noted the tag, "Out of county." He kept moving. In the driver's mirror, he saw the haze of breath swirl inside the sedan, a figure shifting, then stilling. Whoever they were, they did not want a second look. The engine cut. The car did not open. When he turned his key, the sedan eased away, as if gravity had a dimmer switch. He should have called it in. He knew that. He did not. He drove instead to the station because sometimes the only way to sit with fear is to put a busy room around it. The lobby smelled like old paper and damp wool. A bulletin board sagged under missing dog flyers and church suppers. He took the long hallway to his office and unlocked the metal cabinet. The file was there, edges squared, exactly where he had left it. He flipped to the receipt duplicate. A rectangle had been torn free. He matched the ragged edges of the drawing to the hollow in the log. They married perfectly. Ethan shut the drawer and leaned both hands on the cabinet until the bite of cold metal came up through his gloves. If someone had been inside his office, they had been careful enough to leave almost everything right. Careful enough to lift only a single page. Careful enough to walk the paper up that hill in a storm and leave it under a stone that belonged to nobody. He turned to the corkboard across from his desk. He had pinned 3 photos there and refused to take them down. Shadow at 6 months, ears too big for his head and eyes old already. Shadow on his vest. During a training break, chin parked between Ethan's shoulder blades, asleep with full trust. Shadow on the day he earned his certification. Posture tall, pupils lit like someone had flipped the world to the sharp setting. The second photo had a crease running through the dog's muzzle where Ethan had folded it too often and unfolded it too fast. He stepped closer until he could smell the faint pepper of old toner. The door frame clicked. Ethan did not jump. He was too tired to jump. Chief Marla Keegan filled the doorway like a new idea, small and blunt, hair cropped as close as a ranger's. She looked at the snow on his boots, then at his face. "You're early for a man on leave. I found something. If it is another phantom lead, put it in the drawer and give yourself mercy." That was an order he had obeyed for weeks, each time with less faith. He took the drawing out and put it on the desk between them. She did not roll her eyes. She did not smile. She bent and looked for a long few seconds, tracing the notch on the ear with her gaze. "Where did you get it?" "Mountain Hill." Wind dropped it at the stone. She flipped it and saw the receipt stock. Then she did the thing that counted. She let silence stand while her eyes moved to the cabinet and back. He watched the moment she understood the page had lived in this room before it lived in the snow. Her jaw worked once. "Call building services. Have them pull last night's door logs." Already did. No badge swipes after midnight. He held up his phone, and the rear exit camera blacked out from 0031 to 0043. Someone taped it. Her eyes cut to him. "You think it is about the dog. I think whoever did this knows more about him than a prankster does." She watched him until she found what she was measuring. "You're not going to let this go." It was not a question. He tapped the red crayon letters. Neither did he. He meant it, and she knew it. A muscle twitched near her temple, and then the hard part softened just enough. 10 minutes, she said. "Then you bring this downstairs and let Tech photograph it properly. I will pull the old Huxley parcel map. You do not step into those woods alone." He nodded because it was easier than telling her he had already been in those woods more times than he wanted to admit. She started to turn and stopped. "Cole, if it is real and we find him, you do not get to carry the fire any longer. You hear me?" He did not answer. She left. The door sighed shut. Ethan sat again and stared at the drawing like a thing that could blink back. He had not asked for a miracle. He did not trust miracles. He trusted work. He trusted dogs. He trusted a set of laces tied the same way before every shift because you learn quickly what you can control and what you cannot. He took the photo of Shadow from the corkboard and set it beside the child's sketch. The eyes were the same even when wax tried to flatten them. The phone on his desk buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. A single photo loaded slow on the weak station signal, the pixels building from sand to shape. It was Shadow, or a dog made into his shadow, in a narrow pen lit by a single bulb. The shot was close. Too close. A bandage wrapped the right hind leg. The collar plate was an oval, scratched blind. In the corner of the frame, a hand held a scrap of paper up to the lens. Red crayon again. One word. North. Ethan rose before he knew he was on his feet. Outside, the snow thickened. Somewhere west of town, an engine turned over and idled where engines did not usually idle in winter. Say, he could feel it more than hear it. He pulled his coat on and slid the drawing into the inside pocket where body heat might keep the paper from tearing itself apart. He paused at the door and did the thing he had not let himself do in 2 months. He whistled. 2 notes, low and steady. A call, not to the room, but to a presence he could not name. No howl came back. The building hummed. The heater knocked. The silence had weight. He carried it through the hall and into the day anyway. The station door breathed out a tired wash of heat when Ethan stepped into the lobby. Outside, the snow kept writing its slow, white sentence across Northgate. Inside, it smelled like coffee that had been waiting too long, and wool coats trying to dry. He had the drawing in his inside pocket, and the weight of it had shifted from paper to instruction. He headed for records to start the hard grind of maps and land deeds. 3 soft taps came from the glass behind him. Not the door. The side window that faced the alley. He turned. A small face hovered there, fogging the pane with steady breath. Green eyes. Watchful. A red hoodie dark with melted snow clung to narrow shoulders. He opened the alley door and the cold ran around his ankles like a cat. The girl was maybe 10. Barefoot in shoes that had lost the idea of being shoes. Dirt lay under the winter on her cheeks. She did not ask to come in. She put a hand inside her hoodie and brought out something wrapped in brown tissue, then held it 2 hands as if she was offering a folded flag. It was a collar, black leather rubbed grey along the edges. An oval plate, scratched. The holes on the strap stretched to the 3rd notch where Shadow had always worn it. The slider had a burr he had filed down after a chain-link bite back in August. There was a faint line of blue thread inside the lining where he had once repaired a split in the stitch because he could not stand to send the collar out and wait days to get it back. He knew every scar on that leather. This was Shadow's. The girl watched him without blinking. "He's not dead," she said. "Your dog." "Shadow, he's breathing. And he remembers you even when they tell him to forget." Ethan's throat went dry. "Where did you get this?" She glanced past him to the lobby, then to the street. "Not here," she said. "People watch this building. A white van with no company name. The men never smile." He had seen the sedan at the cemetery. He did not like the way the threads pulled together. He pushed the door wider and motioned her into the small interview room off the hall. He set the collar on the table and closed the door behind them. His hands were not steady, but he kept his voice level. "What is your name?" "Maya, last name." "Just Maya. Where are you staying?" "Sometimes my aunt, sometimes the diner dumpsters when the steam vents are warm. You do not need to save me. I did not come for that." "Tell me why you came." Her eyes dropped to the collar and away. "They keep dogs where the fog sits in the trees. The fence hums. Men with radios. Some dogs bark like they are new. Some do not bark at all. The quiet ones are the ones who listen hard. Your dog listens hard. He watched me when I was in the shed. He would not eat when the man with the crow on his neck told him to. He only ate after the man walked away, and I whispered the word easy like I heard you say to him once outside the market. The dog hears that word in a different part of his head." Ethan felt the room tilt. He had said that word to Shadow when a kid reached for him without asking. He had said it with a hand on the shepherd's chest, so the dog felt calm before he heard it. It was not a command Shadow learned at the school. It was theirs. The girl was either the sharpest liar he had ever met, or she had been close to the dog long enough to hear something that belonged in his kitchen. "How did you get this collar?" The man with the scar on his jaw forgot his keys during feeding. "I took the collar from a box under a table because I knew it mattered. I hid it in the lining of my hoodie and walked slow." "Slow looks like you belong." He turned the plate over. The back had a tiny nick near the right screw where he had slipped with the driver the night he mounted it by lamplight. He lined the nick up with the screw head and it married like a key to a lock. He could not breathe for a count of 3. "Who is the man with the crow on his neck? They call him King." "He is not a king. He talks quiet, and the other men do bigger things because of it. He brings people to look at the dogs. He makes the quiet ones pick which dog is fast or strong. He hit a dog with a stick when it would not look away from me. Your dog moved between us, and the stick hit him instead." Ethan blinked the burn from his eyes. Shadow had always placed his body like that. He moved to block before he moved to bite. It was not taught, it was belief. "You said they keep you in a shed." "Sometimes. Sometimes in a truck. Sometimes in a cage that is not for dogs, but small people can fit. I ran when a lock stuck. I left the camp in fog because the men count wrong when they are tired. I went back last night to the hill. I left the drawing where you would find it. The paper came from your desk because the men said they would only believe me if it looked like real police. A woman gave it to me in a coat with fur, the hood. She told me to hurry. She did not look at me after she handed it over. Her hands shook when she let go. The twist landed hard. Someone had helped Maya lift a page from the cabinet. Someone inside the station or close enough to touch its insides. It could be fear. It could be regret. It could be both. Who was the woman? Maya looked at the carpet like answers could be stitched into it. She smelled like coffee and gun oil. One hand had a wedding ring with scratches all over. She said the camera would be off for 11 minutes. She said that word like it cost her something. Ethan felt the cold again through the walls. He thought of the overnight door log and the blacked-out camera span. He thought of the dozen hands that handled evidence and the 2 who hated that duty most. He had names he did not want to say out loud. Not yet. He needed the dog first. He took a breath and pushed forward into the place where action lives. "Show me where the camp is." Maya's chin lifted at that word. Show, not tell. She pulled a crayon out of the hoodie pocket with a kind of small pride. She drew a curve approximating the north ridge above the old quarry. A dirt spur, a skid road with 2 washouts, a line of trees that bent like a shoulder at the wind. You go to the place where cell phones die and then count 30 steps. There is a camera set low on a cedar stump. If you walk like a deer, the lens looks wrong. If you walk like a person, the light blinks red. He believed her. She laid down the map like she had walked it in the dark and needed no light. Then she touched the collar again and something like a hush entered the room. "He remembers you," she said. "Not the work parts, the kitchen parts, the sound of the spoon in the bowl when you make his food, the way your boots take the 3rd step loud and the 4th step soft, the way you breathe when you think about leaving him at home on a day you know you should not. He hears all of that noise when the bad men try to make other noise." Ethan stared at her. He felt his pulse settle to a different rhythm. Shadow was not a file. He was not even a duty. He was a life with ears that had been listening to one person for years. Dogs make maps that people forget how to draw. This girl was telling him the dog was still drawing. He reached for the intercom to call Chief Keegan and paused when something louder than the room shoved in. A horn blew out on Main. Not an impatient car horn, a fast 2-note blast he knew from the county plows. The blast came again, closer. Maya's head snapped to the door. She moved for the underside of the table as if she had rehearsed this since birth. "They are here," she said. "Who?" "The men who watch vans." Sometimes they come to buildings to see who talks. When they do not see who talks, they make noise so someone looks out a window. Keegan's voice hit the hallway. Cole. Now, he opened the door and she was already striding past records toward the front. The reception glass rattled in its frame as a box truck rolled close to the curb. Too close, a snow brush wedged in its grill. No, signage on the panels. The driver looked straight ahead, jaw set. A second later, the truck eased on and turned at the light. In its wake, a man in a parka's hood took 3 photos of the station with his phone and pretended to shoot the sky. Keegan nodded once to a patrolman who drifted out as if he needed air and took a plate number like he was taking a lungful. Ethan turned back to the interview room. Maya stood in the center now, still as a deer when the wind goes wrong. He opened his hand to her. "You are with me," he said. "For now, you do not go back to the alley. You do not go anywhere alone. You will eat, you will sleep, and you will tell me every small thing that does not look important. The small things are the ones that keep you alive." She did not move for a beat. Then she walked to him and put a finger on the blue thread inside the collar. "This is important," she said, and smiled for the first time, a quick, bright shape that did not belong to the winter. He called Keegan in and did the fast version of the truth. Keegan listened and watched Maya while she listened, as if the way the child held her shoulders would write the part of the story that words miss. When Ethan finished, Keegan nodded. "You two do not leave this building without a plan. I will pull Lila Moreno off patrol and put her on the desk with eyes on the street. Tech gets that collar for photos, then it goes wherever Cole says it goes. He has earned that call." She turned to Maya. "You are safe here. It is not a promise I make with light words." Maya's gaze flicked to the bulletin board in the hall where Shadow's certification photo hung in a frame someone had bought with their own cash. She stepped up to it. She placed her palm flat to the glass over the dog's chest as if she could warm him through a picture. "He did not want to bite when they told him to bite a boy," she said without turning. He took the sleeve but not the arm. The man with the crow got mad. "Your dog looked at me. I tapped 2 fingers on the floor. His ears moved, and then he closed his mouth. He closed his mouth and stood like a wall." Ethan felt the room pull tight again. 2 taps on a floor was the way he told Shadow that a bite had done its job in a scenario when talking would have fed the noise. It was a move he had only used twice in real work. A small, private language built over years. Maya lowered her hand from the frame and looked at him. "I know what he is. He is not a weapon. He's a person who wears fur. He could have argued the word person. He did not. He nodded once so he would not use his voice and break something that both of them needed. They moved her to the break room that had been a storage closet before the last remodel. Someone found a blanket that did not smell like coffee. Someone else found a pair of wool socks that had been ordered for a man and never picked up. Ethan set the collar on the table and sat across from Maya so she did not think she was being guarded. She ate the sandwich. He put in front of her like it was a job she wanted to do well. Between bites, she drew on a paper placemat. A row of boxes, a gate, a hand-drawn sign that read, "Quiet Dogs." He saw a small X she made near a narrow rectangle at the far end. What is that? The hole where the heat pipe runs. Sometimes it makes the fence click when the frost gets inside. Sometimes the click makes the lock think a second has passed. I counted 3 nights and it clicked at the same time. If you open a lock when a lock thinks a second has passed, it moves easier. Keegan met his eyes over the girl's head. The look said, "We will have a team and a plan, and it will not be today. And I know you want it to be today." He did not look away. Then he asked the question that had been chewing on the edge of his mind since the alley. "Who told you my name, Maya?" She took a breath. "Not the men. A woman at the diner. She hears everything because people talk louder when the coffee is not fresh. She said you carry a hurt in your right shoulder. She said you would come if I brought you the dog's name. Then she wiped my plate and said to run before the men in the van finished their chili. Ethan could picture the diner and the waitress with the sharp mouth and good hands. He could also picture 3 faces in town who might be feeding 2 hungers at once, the hunger to do right and the hunger to be safe. That was a different kind of rescue, and it would wait. He stood. "We are going to find him," he said, and he said it in a way that drew a line under the words, not a promise to make her feel held, a plan that had learned to breathe. Maya nodded and pulled the collar closer, as if she knew where it needed to live for a few more hours. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the station windows in their frames. Somewhere, a plow gave 2 fast blasts and turned back toward the ridge. In Ethan's head, the sound of it became something else. Not a warning, not yet, but a reminder. North. The interrogation room at Northgate PD was the smallest one, the one without the stale coffee smell baked into the paint. 4 walls, a steel table, 2 chairs, a single camera in the corner with a red light that never stopped blinking. Ethan chose it because you could hear your own pulse in here. Maya sat in the far chair, knees drawn up under the red hoodie. The collar lay on the table between them like a live wire neither wanted to touch. Ethan slid a legal pad across to her, along with a box of crayons from the evidence drawer, the kind they kept for child witnesses. Her fingers hovered over the colors, then she chose a dull green, the color of pine needles in shade. "You said you know where they keep him," Ethan said, voice low. She nodded, glancing once at the camera. "I don't want them to hear me." "They won't, just draw it." She began slowly, the first lines tentative, then quicker, more sure. A curving road, a broken spur leading off to the right, a long rectangle for a clearing. She shaded in tight lines around it, trees pressing in like a wall. A thin blue mark to one side. Water, maybe a creek, then an odd square far from the main buildings. She switched to black and drew jagged loops on a fence line, her hand trembling slightly. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "Razor wire," she murmured. "You can't see it in the fog unless the sun hits. But the sun doesn't hit much there." Her hand hesitated, then she took the red crayon and marked a large X over the distant square. "That's where they bury the broken dogs." Ethan's gut went cold. Broken? The ones that don't obey anymore. Or the ones they hurt too much trying to make them mean. She dropped the crayon and sat back. Her breathing was steady, but her eyes were far away. He let the silence sit for a beat before pushing the map gently toward him. The lines weren't perfect, but the spacing, the proportions, they had the ring of truth. There was one more detail. In a corner of the page, almost as an afterthought, she drew a single cage larger than the others. Inside it, a figure with pointed ears stood tall, even in confinement. "That's his," she said simply. Ethan ran a hand over his jaw. "How sure are you?" "Same way you know when it's him running toward you, even if you can't see him. You just know." He gathered the drawing, stood, and told her to stay put. Down the hall, Chief Keegan was in her office, jacket draped over the chair, reading through reports. She looked up as he entered. "I need access to old property records," Ethan said without preamble. "North Ridge, hunting lodge, private land." Keegan frowned but got up, leading him into the records room. The place smelled of dust and manila folders. She flipped through drawers until she pulled one labeled Huxley, Raymond. Bought in '84. 12 cabins, a main lodge, and a training barn. Last activity recorded. 8 years ago. Disappeared. No heirs. No claims. Ethan scanned the yellowed deeds, the old survey map, the tree lines, the bends in the ridge trail, almost identical to what Maya had drawn. "It's the same place," he said quietly. Keegan's eyes narrowed. "Where'd you get the map?" "From her," Ethan said. "She's seen it, and she's seen shadow there. She's a child. Trauma distorts memory. She knew about the third fence. The one hidden behind the pines. She marked a burial ground. She's either telling the truth or she's been there long enough to believe it. Keegan's gaze sharpened. If you're wrong, I'm not. He folded the record, tucking the copy under his arm. Back in the interview room, Maya had turned the crayons into a neat line, ordered by size. She looked up when he came in. It's real, he told her. The place exists. Her shoulders loosened, but she didn't smile. They move sometimes, she warned, but not far. Too much to pack. He crouched so they were at eye level. Do you remember faces? She nodded slowly. One man has a crow tattoo that looks like it's flying down his neck. Another smells like diesel. The big one calls himself King. He's not. Ethan wrote it down, then asked, "How close did you get to Shadow?" Her eyes softened in a way that made the room feel warmer. Close enough to see he still stands the same. Left paw forward, head tilted, like he's listening for something only you say. Before Ethan could respond, a knock came at the door. Officer Lila Moreno stepped in, a file in her hand. "We've got something," she said, glancing at Maya, then at him. "One of the game cams up near the ridge picked up movement 2 nights ago. Large dog, shepherd build, with a limp." Ethan's heart kicked hard. "Where?" Lila slid the photo across. The grainy image was all fog and motion blur, but the outline was there, and the left ear notched. Maya leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Told you." Ethan looked at her, then at the collar still on the table. Shadow wasn't just out there. He was waiting, and now Ethan had a map. The forest north of Northgate had a way of holding its breath. Even in daylight, the air felt filtered, as if the sun had to fight through a dozen veils before it reached the ground. Ethan moved along the slope with slow, measured steps, eyes scanning for the landmarks Maya had etched in crayon: crooked stump, rock teeth, the ridge that dipped like a bow. Maya followed close, wearing one of his fleece jackets over the red hoodie. She didn't ask to rest, didn't complain, only tapped his arm now and then to point out something familiar. "That log," she whispered. "That's where I tripped when they brought me in." They laughed. Ethan slowed. The snow here was shallower, broken in patches where the underbrush had been pressed down. He knelt, brushing away a crust of frost to reveal a faint boot tread, the lugs worn in a way you didn't see on store shelves. More than one person had come through here, and recently. 10 yards ahead, a cedar stood with its crown leaning toward the trail. Maya stopped and jabbed her finger toward it. "That's one," she mouthed. Ethan crouched, pulling a small pair of binoculars from his coat. The tree's trunk had a scar where a branch had been cut clean. Nestled in the notch was a black lens no bigger than a quarter. At a glance it might pass for a burl, but the faint glint of glass gave it away. A frost-edged red diode blinked once, then again. "Not a game cam," Ethan whispered. "This is watching for people, not deer." He traced the angle. The lens pointed directly toward the approach they'd just taken. If someone was watching in real time, they'd seen them already. He shifted his stance, scanning the tree line, and found another, further in, mounted on a spruce at knee height. A pattern began to emerge in his mind, overlapping cones of surveillance. "They know the path," Maya said quietly. "That's how they caught me. I heard beeping before the lights came on." A low shiver worked down Ethan's spine. He'd been in enough tactical setups to know that cameras like these meant more than eyes. They meant response teams stationed within shouting distance. He motioned for her to follow and cut a wide arc off the main trail, boots sinking in drifts. The ground fell away into a shallow swale, a natural blind from the cameras. They crouched there, listening. The only sound was the occasional creak of ice in the branches overhead. Then came the crack. It was clean, deliberate, wood under weight, not the scatter of a squirrel or the flutter of a bird. Behind them, maybe 30 yards. Maya froze, her eyes snapping to his. Ethan's hand went to the grip of his sidearm but didn't draw. In the quiet, even the sound of a gun clearing leather would carry. Instead, he reached into his vest and pulled out a slim mirror, tilting it low to catch the reflection behind them. The fog blurred the distance, but a shadow moved where there should have been only trees. Too tall for an animal, too steady for the wind. It lingered, then eased behind a trunk. Maya's breathing quickened. "We're not alone," she mouthed. He gave a single nod and tapped her arm twice, a signal to stay low and move when he moved. They slid deeper into the swale, following its curve until it met a fallen log slick with ice. Beyond it, the forest opened slightly into a clearing. From here, Ethan spotted something else. Branches too cleanly broken, snow brushed aside in straight lines. A trail, deliberate and recent. And in the distance, barely visible through the fog, the pale outline of a fence. Maya's grip tightened on his sleeve. "That's it," she whispered. "The fence that hums." He scanned the tree line again. The shadow was gone, but his pulse stayed high. The silence had shifted, as if the forest was listening now. A sudden gust rattled the cedar above them, and the camera's diode winked. Somewhere, a monitor lit up with their position. Somewhere, a person leaned closer to a screen. Ethan knew what came next in setups like this, movement from the flanks, a push to herd them toward a choke point. He looked at Maya, saw the steadiness in her despite the fear, and knew they had only minutes. "We're pulling back," he whispered. "We've seen enough for today." They started to retreat along the swale, keeping low, but the forest didn't relax. 2 more cracks of branches came, one left, one right, closer this time. Whoever was out there was tightening the net. Ethan adjusted course, angling toward a narrow chute between boulders that would mask their heat signature from the cameras. Maya slipped once on the ice, and he caught her without a sound. When they finally reached the outer edge of the ridge trail, the wind picked up, masking their footsteps. Only then did Ethan allow them to climb, back toward the truck parked a mile away. At the crest, he looked back once. Through the fog, the cedar with the hidden lens seemed to be staring straight at them, and in his mind, he saw Shadow, alert, ears pricked, trapped somewhere beyond that fence, watching too. The snow under Ethan's boots had just begun to harden again when the forest erupted. Shapes blurred out of the fog. 3, maybe 4 men in heavy winter gear, moving fast and silent. The first slammed a rifle butt into his ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Another seized Maya by the arm. She tried to twist away, but he lifted her clean off her feet. "Don't hurt her." Ethan's voice was sharp, but another blow caught him across the temple, turning the world into fractured light. When the blur cleared, his hands were bound behind his back with a plastic zip tie that bit into the skin. Maya was gone. They hustled him through the trees, deeper toward the humming fence he'd glimpsed earlier. He caught flashes of the cameras overhead, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. The clearing opened into a compound of low structures, all muted in color and half swallowed by fog. The men didn't speak except for short bursts into radios. Then the one in front stopped, turning toward Ethan with an easy, confident motion. The raven tattoo across his neck stretched as he smiled. A predator's smile without warmth. "Lieutenant Cole," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "Or do you prefer Ethan? I'm Gage Crow. Around here they call me King." Ethan met his gaze. "You're a long way from any throne." "Funny thing about thrones," Gage said, stepping closer. "They're just chairs until someone decides to sit in them. Come on, let me show you what I built." They marched him toward a barn-like structure. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, oil, and something sharper, fear. Rows of cages lined the walls, each holding a German shepherd or Malinois, lean and restless. Some paced, others sat rigid, eyes tracking the movement. Beautiful animals, Gage said lightly, gesturing as if he were showing off a prized collection. "Every one of them trained to perfection, better than the police ever managed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You break them." "I reshape them," Gage corrected. "Every dog here was discarded, injured, retired, or just inconvenient. I give them purpose again." "Watch." He nodded to one of his men, who unclipped the latch on a cage at the far end. The dog that stepped out was larger than most, coat dulled with dirt, a faint hitch in the right leg. Ethan's breath caught. Shadow. The clipped ear, the scar across his shoulder where a falling beam had caught him in the fire. They were all there. But the eyes, they were different. Flat, guarded, like the light behind them had been turned low. Gage watched Ethan's reaction with a trace of amusement. "Recognize him. He's my best." Ethan forced his voice to stay level. "He's not yours. Ownership is about control. Let's see what kind of control you had." Gage gestured to a handler in chain gloves. "Target drill." The handler pulled off Shadow's muzzle. Another man tossed a burlap dummy into the center of the floor. The command came, sharp and in German. Shadow lunged without hesitation, teeth sinking into the dummy's throat seam. The sound of tearing fabric filled the space, but then, just for a moment, Shadow looked up. His gaze locked on Ethan's, and something flickered. Not a wag, not a whine, just a shift in posture, a tilt of the ears, a spark under ash. The handler jerked the leash, barking another command. Shadow's body snapped back to rigid obedience, but Ethan had seen it. The dog knew him. "You see?" Gage's tone was almost conversational. "You thought you buried him. I dug him up and made him better." "You can't train loyalty out of a dog like that," Ethan said. Gage's smile thinned. "No, but you can redirect it. And if it doesn't redirect?" He looked over at another row of cages, where a black shepherd sat motionless. "Well, then you dig another hole out back." The threat landed cold. Gage signaled to his men. "Put him in the pit, and the girl, keep her separate. She's not part of this." Ethan twisted against their grip. "She's just a kid. Leave her alone." "Don't worry," Gage said, already turning away. "She's safer than most here, at least for now." They dragged Ethan down a concrete corridor that reeked of damp and diesel. Behind him, he could still hear Shadow's breathing, quick and steady, as the dog was led back to his cage. That sound stayed in his ears long after the door to the pit clanged shut. It was dark, the kind of dark that pressed against your eyes. The floor was dirt-packed hard, the air laced with mold. Somewhere above, faint and far away, a single bark broke the silence. Short, deep, unmistakable. Shadow's bark. Ethan leaned back against the wall, pain throbbing in his ribs, and held on to that sound. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a message. Shadow was still in there, under the commands, under the conditioning. Waiting. The pit had no windows, just a concrete ceiling that dripped condensation in slow, patient drops. Ethan sat against the wall, wrists raw from the zip ties, every muscle tight with the need to move and no room to move in. The air carried the smell of damp earth, rust, and something animal. The door groaned open without warning. A rectangle of light cut into the dark, and in that light stood a young man, thin, nervous energy in his shoulders, a remote clutched in one hand. Behind him, filling the doorway, was Shadow. For a heartbeat, Ethan forgot to breathe. The dog's coat was dulled, patches along his flank where the fur had thinned, a bandage wrapping the right hind leg. But it was the posture that hit him, head low, ears halfway back, eyes locked straight, ahead as if he'd been told the world existed only in a straight line between him and the man holding the remote. The young man stepped inside, closing the door with a metallic thud. "Reflex test," he muttered, more to himself than to Ethan. His voice cracked slightly, like someone reciting orders they didn't fully understand. He pressed the first button on the remote. Shadow stiffened instantly, muscles coiling, lips peeling back in a controlled, silent snarl. He took 3 steps toward Ethan, steady, measured. Ethan didn't move back. "Sit," he said, calm and low. Shadow's stride faltered. The command wasn't shouted. It was the same tone Ethan had used on cold mornings in the training yard, the tone that said, "Trust me," without saying the words. "Down," Ethan said next. A muscle twitched along Shadow's neck. The growl faded into a breath. His paws shifted, weight rocking back, not quite sitting, but no longer closing the distance. The young man, Trent, Ethan remembered someone calling him, frowned and hit the second button. Shadow yelped, a sharp, pained sound, stumbling sideways before regaining his stance. "Again," Ethan said, voice firm but not loud. "Down." This time, Shadow's ears turned toward the voice before his head did. His body trembled, caught between the electric bite of the collar and the pull of memory. "That's not supposed to happen," Trent said, glancing at the door as if afraid someone might be watching. He pressed the button halfway, then stopped, eyes flicking between Ethan and the dog. "What are you doing to him?" Ethan didn't answer. He just said, "Heel." The shift was subtle. A step sideways, a turn of the shoulders. Then Shadow positioned himself between Ethan and Trent, facing the young man with a low, steady growl. Trent took a step back. No, that's not right." His hand went to his belt, fumbling for a taser, but before he could draw it, Shadow moved. Not a lunge to attack, but a sharp, deliberate sidestep that knocked Trent's arm wide. The taser clattered to the floor. For the first time since stepping into the room, Trent looked unsure of himself. "Stupid dog," he muttered, but his voice had lost its edge. He backed toward the door, snatching up the taser with shaky fingers. "If anyone asks, I ran the test. Nothing unusual." The door shut, leaving Ethan and Shadow alone in the dim. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It hummed with recognition. Shadow turned, stepping close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of him. The dog's nose brushed his bound hands, sniffing once, twice, then lingering at the crook of his elbow the way he used to after a long shift. A soft whine escaped, barely audible. Ethan leaned his forehead toward him. "It's me, boy. I'm here." Shadow's tail moved. Not a wag, not yet, but a slow shift side to side. His eyes, dulled for weeks, began to sharpen at the edges. Somewhere above them, a door slammed and voices barked orders, but down in the pit, Ethan felt something he hadn't since the fire, a thread, stretched thin but unbroken, pulling taut between them. Whatever they'd done to Shadow, whatever commands they'd tried to burn into him, hadn't erased what mattered. The old code was still there, and now it was awake. The shed they'd put Maya in was little more than 4 rotting walls and a roof patched with sheets of rusted tin. The air inside was bitter, every breath carrying the tang of old wood and oil. Her wrists were bound in front with a strip of plastic, tight enough to pinch but not enough to keep her from moving if she worked at it. A thin shaft of light bled through a gap between 2 warped boards, just enough to paint a pale stripe across the cracked concrete floor. She sat in it, knees drawn up, studying the space like she was mapping a way out in her head. They'd taken her shoes, but they hadn't checked her pockets. In the lining of her hoodie, hidden deep where the fabric doubled, she'd kept a shard of stone she'd pried loose from the wall days ago. The edge was rough, just sharp enough to scrape. She worked it against the floor in small, deliberate strokes. The sound was faint. Scratch, pause, scratch. But to Maya, it was louder than the beating of her own heart. Each pass cut deeper into the cement, white dust collecting under her hands. She wasn't drawing pictures this time. She was writing. "He knows you." She didn't stop to admire it. She traced over the letters until her fingertips ached, until the words stood out even in the dim light. When she was done, she slid the shard back into her hoodie, stood and studied the shed door. A dented metal food dish sat just inside. They'd left it from the last time they pushed a meal through. She picked it up, turned it toward the light so it caught the pale stripe and angled it just right. The reflection spilled over the carved words, making them glow faintly. She set the dish at the far corner, where the crack under the wall met the dirt outside, the exact line of sight to the kennel runs. She didn't know if Shadow would pass by, but if he did, if his eyes landed there, he'd see it, and she believed he'd understand. Outside, footsteps crunched, voices drifted, two men talking low. Then came the sound she'd been waiting for, the shuffle of paws on packed dirt. Heavy, familiar. Shadow appeared in the narrow slice of light beneath the wall. Maya froze, afraid to move, afraid to scare him away. His head turned, ears pricking. For a second he stood still, just breathing. Then his gaze caught the glow on the concrete. He didn't move closer, but his body changed, a tilt of the head, a shift in weight, the faintest lift of his tail. His eyes stayed on the words, reading them in whatever way a dog reads, through memory, scent, the echo of a voice he trusted. From somewhere beyond, a sharp whistle snapped the air. Shadow flinched, but didn't turn immediately. His ears swiveled toward the sound, then back toward Maya. It was only when the leash jerked that he moved on, disappearing from view. Maya exhaled slowly, her pulse steadying. She hadn't spoken a word, but she'd sent the message. He knows you, and you know him. That night in the pit, Ethan noticed the difference before Shadow even stepped into the light. The dog's movements were less mechanical. His eyes searched the space, not just scanned it. When they landed on Ethan, they held. Whatever thread had been fraying inside him was winding back together, and somewhere, in the dark edges of his mind, Ethan knew the girl in the shed had something to do with it. Shadow was remembering. The shed lock gave way with a soft click under the bent nail and paperclip Maya had hidden in her sleeve. She eased the door open, breath fogging in the cold, and slipped into the shadows. The camp was quieter than usual. Half the lights were out on the west side, and the hum of one of the generators had gone still. She moved quickly, hugging the walls, skirting past stacks of crates draped with tarps. The kennel row loomed ahead, a line of chain-link runs. She counted 3, 4, then the 5th. There he was. Shadow rose when he saw her, ears forward, a low whine escaping his throat. The bandage on his hind leg was frayed, but his stance was steady. She pulled a folded scrap of paper from her hoodie, a feed schedule she'd lifted earlier. One number was underlined 3 times. She punched it into the keypad on the latch. The lock gave a metallic snap. "Come on," she whispered. Shadow slipped out, pressing his head briefly into her hand before following, limping but sure. They cut behind the training barn toward the pit. 2 guards sat outside, rifles propped, half asleep. Maya picked up a rock and tossed it deep into the brush. A branch cracked, and both men turned, moving toward the sound. She darted to the control box, flipping the lever marked South Cell Release. A hiss echoed from below. In the pit, Ethan felt the door release. He didn't hesitate, but the steel cable on his ankle held him. Shadow lunged forward, teeth clamping on the bolt plate anchoring it to the wall. Muscles bunched. He yanked once, twice. The rusted metal groaned, then tore free. Ethan stumbled forward, half dragging the chain until it clattered loose. They met Maya at the corner of the barn. "You okay?" Ethan asked. She nodded, already moving. But then a siren split the air, short, sharp, and close. Lights flared across the compound. Shouts rose. Ethan stopped, turned toward the tree line, and let out a howl. 3 short bursts, 1 long. It was a code almost no one outside his old unit would know. Miles away, In an apartment above the Northgate Diner, Sergeant Lila Moreno froze at her kitchen table. The howl wasn't random. It was Morse, punched through the air the way they'd practiced for emergencies. She grabbed her radio. "Cole's in. Trouble," she barked. "Activate SWAT and track my GPS. We move now." Back at the camp, searchlights cut through the fog. Ethan, Maya, and Shadow plunged into the trees, the dog keeping pace despite his injury. Somewhere behind them, engines roared to life, but ahead, faint and growing, was the beat of rotor blades coming in fast. The compound erupted in chaos. Searchlights sliced through the night, beams vanishing into the thick, rolling fog that had crept in from the marsh. Somewhere above, the thump of rotor blades grew louder, beating against the mist. Ethan scooped Maya into his arms when she stumbled on the uneven ground. Her breath came in sharp bursts against his neck, but she clung to him without a sound. Shadow limped alongside, his coat streaked with mud and his chest heaving, yet his eyes never left the tree line ahead. Every few steps he glanced back, ears pricked for pursuit. A flood of barking erupted behind them. Shapes moved in the fog, guard dogs straining against their handlers. One broke free, its silhouette lunging through the mist. Shadow spun, teeth bared, intercepting it mid-charge. The clash was quick and brutal, the other dog yelping before retreating into the haze. Without waiting for praise, Shadow bounded forward again, guarding their flank. Through the shifting white curtain, a strobe of blue lights flashed. A voice cut through the chaos, amplified but steady. "Ethan! 2 o'clock! Move!" It was Lila. Figures in tactical gear emerged from the fog, weapons raised but aimed past them. An explosion cracked behind, fuel drums going up, throwing a dull orange glow into the mist. The heat licked their backs as they reached the SWAT perimeter. Hands pulled Maya from Ethan's arms. Another guided him toward the open bay of an armored van. Shadow hesitated at the edge, gaze sweeping the fog as if memorizing the path they'd taken. Only when Ethan called his name did he leap inside, landing beside him with a thud. As the doors slammed shut, the world outside vanished into a blur of sirens and rotor wash. Inside, Ethan rested a hand on Shadow's neck, feeling the steady thump of his heartbeat. The dog looked up at him, muddy, bleeding, but unbroken. They were out of Fog Yard, but Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. The real reckoning was still ahead. Months had passed since the night at Fog Yard. The scars on Shadow's body had faded, but the way he moved, alert yet calm, spoke of battles fought and survived. Ethan had kept his promise. Together with Maya, he'd founded the Shadow Center, a quiet stretch of land turned into a haven for abandoned or mistreated working dogs. Here, they were healed, trained, and given a second chance. On the day of the dedication, the air was crisp with early spring. Rows of handlers, officers, and families filled the small courtyard. Shadow sat beside Ethan in front of the podium, his posture proud, head high, the faintest wag in his tail when children passed. Maya stepped forward to speak. Her voice was steady but carried the weight of nights spent wondering if they'd ever see him again. "He didn't forget us," she said, glancing at Shadow. "He just got lost for a while. But when he found his way back, he reminded us what loyalty looks like." There was a brief silence before applause broke out, rolling across the yard. Ethan rested a hand on Shadow's shoulder, feeling the dog lean ever so slightly into him, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they'd rebuilt. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Ethan found Shadow stretched out on the porch of the old farmhouse they now called home. The shepherd's eyes were fixed on the horizon, ears twitching at sounds only he could hear. It was the same look Ethan had seen in the field, part watchfulness, part peace. The camera lingered on that moment, the sunlight brushing his fur gold. And then a voice, warm and inviting, asked, "What's your story with a loyal pet?" If you believe in stories like Shadow's, where loyalty and second chances change lives, Support the German Shepherd channel, because somewhere out there, another hero is waiting to be found.